Mayor, I can't thank you enough for joining me today in light of everything that's happening in the world. We've wanted to have a conversation for some time, and it's just interesting the time that we're in. First, I want to say thank you so much for everything that you're doing as the leader of our city.
You're welcome, but thank you. Yeah, it's been extremely hectic today. We had a bunch of stuff going on this morning too, since we did a new emergency ordinance. So in our little world, we had to stop everything and work on that for about 4 hours, and we have a council meeting tomorrow morning. So it's been pretty wild. I don't have your questions in front of me that you sent earlier. I guess this will be a nice respite from coronavirus for a while, but I'll see what I can do for you.
Well, I just want to say to you, I usually have questions that I ask on our Business of Innovation podcast, but certainly with what's happening these days, the questions have changed. And I guess the one thing, one thing
Okay.
that I would really like to ask you is just how are you holding up? How are you staying resilient in all that you must be dealing with right now?
Well, in our relatively small pond over here in this part of the world, we're just part of something going on so much larger. So it's unique in that regard. There's no escape from it for anybody. And here in South Carolina, as a city, we're very much secondary to what the state does. So we try to take action that we can under our authority, and still wish that the state would continue to do as much as they possibly can. So we kind of watch every order from the governor very closely, and try to ask the question, well, if the governor's ordering that, what else can we do on the local level?
Mm-hmm. And it seems like you have a team of really good people around you, your council and others. And certainly, Mayor, you're the longest running mayor for Greenville. So it seems like you have good people around you to support you and help you move forward, make decisions, and do things quickly as needed. Is that the case?
Right, and a great city manager as well. From the very beginning, it kind of starts at City Hall, and it started this way every city across the country, I'm sure. With City Hall several weeks ago, where we basically closed City Hall and sent everyone home to work with just very few people. And so it was we had to close everything in the lobby, the building itself, and make sure everybody can operate online. And then after that, we closed the parks and city facilities, playgrounds and everything, and keep an eye on, where the problems may be. Like, for example, the first weekend of everything, we noticed that a lot of crowds were gathering in Falls Park. Well, Falls Park is obviously a place where people will gather when the weather's warm. So we probably should have caught that. But the minute we saw that happening, we realized we had to close Falls Park, and we did that. But the very first action by council, other than closing City Hall, came shortly thereafter, when we had to make the very painful decision to use our emergency powers, which we do have, and the mayor has. First of all, I pulled it out first, which is to close the restaurants and bars, which is unprecedented in our history. And I think just a few hours after we did it, the governor ordered it to be done statewide. So again, we have to exercise the authority that we have, and then wait to see what the governor is going to do after that. In South Carolina, the governor has power of preemption. The whole state government does. That is, if they choose to operate in an area, then the local governments cannot. So again, we have to choose, where we can be effective and where we can be legal. Mm-hmm. But you have a great team. The city council, I want to quickly add, has been very much united throughout the whole effort. So every one of the decision points along the way, and there have been many now, the council's been unanimous.
One of the things that you've said in the past is that Greenville's success and what makes Greenville great is that there's good planning and there's even greater partnerships. And I believe you mean that to be business partnerships and other. Is that beneficial? Is that helpful right now with what's happening?
It sure is. It's public-private partnerships, and those are both with businesses as well as with nonprofits. And it's never been more important. We know who all the players are. We know who to call, and we can sort of know who to expect to hear from. And it's worked exactly that way. So we're working to bring people together and coordinate things in Greenville. Public health is under state law is a county function, and emergency preparedness is certainly a county-wide matter. but the emergency preparedness efforts are often led from Greenville City Hall. So we played a role in that. We found we've been in touch with, of course, Bon Secours and Prisma from the very beginning. That's been a very good relationship and an extremely important one. In fact, every action the city council has taken has been with the urging and with the blessing, if you will, of the public health officials, whether it's county public health or Prisma and Bon Secours physicians. So we've stayed in very close touch with all of those people. But we have played a kind of a special role in that. We have realized that if we don't convene the meeting, perhaps it won't get convened. So just last week, we convened a media press conference for all the media in Greenville County to hear at one time, not just from the chairman of county council, Butch Curvin and myself, but more importantly, to hear from public health officials and emergency preparedness officials and DHEC. And we're hosting that event at the Greenville Convention Center every Friday. We'll have another one tomorrow with different players there, different people who are involved in this, school district, some social service agencies, issues like that. But it's just a way to let the community, let the media ask questions to everyone at one time in one room. Mm-hmm. And we pull that together, and that's the sort of role we try to play, bring people together.
Because our podcast, The Business of Innovation, are shared with our students, they're shared with deans across the country, and they're shared with anyone affiliated with Clemson. I want to bring up the fact that you've been mentored by Max Heller, you've been mentored by Carol Campbell. What have you learned from the two of them that's helped you in this situation? And I'm asking that for students who are learning to be leaders now.
That's a good question. I have had a lot of mentors, and actually, when I was in high school, I was Max Heller's youth chairman, or the youth committee, and I was youth committee chairman. And Max was good at talking to high school kids when I was in high school, and taking us very seriously. And I got a kind of a small peek inside of how City Hall worked at an early age, so that was a great experience. And then I worked for Carol Campbell, who was our congressman, and then later the governor of South Carolina. He brought BMW to South Carolina, and worked very closely with him. I worked in Washington, D.C. for several years for Carol Campbell. And I very much sort of always modeled my mayor's office operation, if you will, after what I learned while working for Congressman Campbell.
And can you talk a little bit more about that? I mean, what was it about him? And I definitely see similarities in your style, but could you talk a little bit more about that? What he inspired you?
Well, I would say a couple things. Well, again, there were two very different personalities. In fact, they even ran against one another for Congress at one time. But Max, of course, was all about quality of life. That is, the city was more than just focused on what you might call economic development and the police and fire and the basics of a city. That's all that is first and foremost. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, he had a strong attention to making Greenville a very livable city, and that's very much been what I've been about since I've been mayor, trying to really make what distinguishes us, what makes us different and unique. And I think it's our focus on quality of life. It's the walkable downtown, everything you see there. And for those who may have been concerned that, well, what about economic development? Well, we've found that by making ourselves a very desirable place to live and being very attentive to those kinds of things, everything from the trails we build to the parks and green space, by being attentive to that, that's the kind of place that attracts jobs and businesses. That seems natural now to hear that, but a couple of years ago, that was still kind of a debatable point. Well, it's not debatable anymore. People do want to go to these kind of communities, and that was certainly an early thing I learned from Max Heller and continued that. With Carol Campbell, one thing I learned from Governor Campbell is he would do his normal duties that you'd have to do as a congressman, but he was always on the lookout for doing something unexpected. He liked to innovate. He liked to come up with an issue that maybe no one else is seeing. And when he became governor, he really could do that kind of thing. And that's the way I believe in governing too, that you don't just follow the polls. You don't just do what everybody's expecting. You do things that are unexpected. Mm-hmm. And I give an example of that. I'd say Falls Park was a classic case. Mm-hmm. A lot of things that the city didn't have to do. In fact, there was really no initiative to do anything like that. we had the bridge over the waterfall, and that was just the way it was. The big highway, 4-lane highway bridge was on top of the waterfall for 40 years, and there really was very little momentum, no serious momentum, I would say, to remove the bridge and create Falls Park. We had a wonderful group in town, the Carolina Foothills Garden Club, and they had a vision of a garden down there along the river, but they were about the only ones who were out there talking about it. And there just wasn't any momentum for removing a bridge, and that became one of many decisions I would play a role in, and with a lot of people in my councils over the years, to do things that we didn't have to do. Moving baseball downtown, good example too. People were pretty happy with this stadium out on I-85. But all of these things adding up sent Greenville in a different direction. It sort of changed the whole look and feel of our city, certainly our image and our self-identity, and kind of put us where we are today, which is a city that has a lot of uniqueness to it and authenticity. And it's just different from a lot of cities. And that's because we do things very differently. And I learned that sort of state of mind. It appeals to my natural creativity, if you will. I like creating things, as I can't help myself on that. But politically and otherwise, with Governor Campbell, he was always looking for that sort of a different angle that no one else is thinking of, and going in a different direction. So I think I learned a lot from him on that.
I love that you shared what you learned from each of them, because it's so clear. It's so obvious seeing that in our city. And resilience, according to the research, is 3 things. It's facing down the difficulty of something. It's finding meaning and purpose. And the third thing is getting creative. And anyone who's watched you as mayor knows how creative, how open you are to innovating. And I know that with regard to the bridge, Chris Stone told me once that he used to lay awake at night and think about if he blew up the bridge himself, how long he'd have to be in jail, because he was part of a group of people that, had studied bridges in Europe and saw your vision and wanted that to happen. And yet you were unpopular with some people at that time who didn't want that road to be changed.
Yeah, it's the age-old issue of change. Most people really don't want change. And I learned a number of things during that issue that I've used on other occasions since, and that is that there is a bias in favor of status quo and everything. But also, it's important if you're gonna make a change. The best thing you can do is show people what you're going to do, and I mean by that, illustrate it. We went for a long time in that debate over removing the bridge without an illustration of the park. And once we had a good illustration and put it on the front page of the Greenville News at the time, this is pre-internet, we had more people say, oh, well, so it's not just about removing a bridge, it's about obtaining something like this, a world-class, beautiful garden in the middle of the city with a pedestrian bridge. And that was kind of a game changer. And I always put that down as a good marker that you've got to illustrate things, you've got to show people it's not just about change, it's about what you're going to get for that change. So we learned that lesson, and later on when we talked about moving baseball downtown, we were much quicker to show people what it would look like and take some people to other cities to experience what an urban baseball stadium is like, a mixed-use stadium with residential wrapped around it, that kind of thing, something different. So those are some good takeaways that have served me well in the future.
Absolutely. And I think when you took office was about the time that you made the statement that you wanted Greenville to be the most beautiful and livable city in the country. That's a big statement. That's a huge goal. I mean, how did you get the inspiration and the boldness to say that?
Yeah. Well, thank you for noticing. But, that was, and I've tried to say that, I believe in having a purpose and something you can state that this is what we're trying to be all about. And I used to put it in terms of Greenville's always been good about renewal. We've always been good about redevelopment, and that goes back a long way. Taking what we have and not just walking away from it, but trying to make it better in redevelopment. And I just try to encapsulate what I'm trying to be about, which was to make the city the most beautiful and livable city in America. And if you do that, you're going to attract incredibly talented people. You're going to attract tourists, which we never saw in the past, and suddenly we have tourists. And you're going to attract jobs and innovation. And that's exactly what's happened. Because again, I think that's what people are looking for. in this country and across the world to live in communities like that. And so that's helped focus on what we're trying to do.
It must be a very fine line that you walk right now, trying to preserve the livability, to preserve the business aspect, but also keep your community safe. I'm sure a lot of different opinions are coming at you. How do you maintain your sense of what to do going forward?
Well, the things do change, and and now with the success of so many fundamental projects we put in place. Number one, I would say encouraging residential in downtown Greenville. That was a huge game changer, and it took a lot of work 10, 15 years ago to make any of that happen. The city had to get directly involved in helping to put in place some early residential development, to put people on the streets after 5 o'clock, to put people on the streets on weekends. So that's what the residential's all about in our mixed use of our downtown. Putting that in place was very, very important, but all of these things took have fallen into place, and now we have a different kind of city. So the way I look at it now is, and things are kind of upside down. At one time we were begging people to live downtown, just whatever we could do to get a sort of a critical mass downtown. We achieved that. Well, now we have that issue certainly taken care of. We have so many people downtown, and it's become so desirable. We have retail back, but now we have new issues, and the new issues are affordability. Whereas once we were just trying to get anyone to live downtown, now we have a lot of people living downtown. The demand is very high, and that means the value of the properties go up. So now we have housing that used to be, maybe $150,000 condo downtown is now worth, $600,000. So we have new issues to face, and it came with our success. So today our issues are different. We're focused on not just residential, but affordable residential, at least in the area of the downtown, and how we can achieve that. So with success comes a whole new set of issues.
Absolutely. And speaking of a whole new set of issues, I'm wondering, as you thinking forward into the future, I wonder what kind of lessons we're going to learn from COVID-19. Because always there are lessons, and always there are positive things, I think, that come from these type of situations. And I'm wondering, kind of from your perspective, what you're beginning to think about, takeaways.
Well, it will, just as I said a minute ago, that with the success of downtown and the city and attracting people, so now we have lots of residential, but the prices go up high and are higher now, and we have a new set of issues. This is going to change the landscape pretty dramatically as well. We're going to find a number of new challenges with those the residential rate we have, though I imagine some of those prices are now going to go down, by the way, could happen. But certainly we're going to see vacancies or threat of vacancies with our wonderful retail scene and restaurant scene in our downtown. I hope not, but we have to realize that possibility. And so we're going to have to help that other element of mixed use survive, that is the retail and the restaurant scene that's so valuable to our city. So we'll be focusing a lot more than we ever were a few weeks ago on what we can do to maintain and build back that. And the hotels that were jumping up everywhere in downtown. At one time we had, other than the Hyatt, we didn't have any other hotels. And then a few years later, we've got hotel construction everywhere. So that's going to change. And beyond that, I will say this, a little inside baseball for the city of Greenville. We learned a lot in the recession, 08, 09, and 10, in terms of how we maintain the budget of the city. So we actually budgeted every year after the recession. We budgeted with a couple numbers in mind. We always had in front of us the worst case scenario, that if we had another recession, are we prepared to maintain the city first class police department, fire department, all the basics, or how can we do that? So in the good times when we were spending money, we had surplus funds at that time. Those were indeed surplus. We tried to spend those on very discretionary things that we could, if we had to, we could cut back on those things again. And so I hope that will put us in good stead for what's in front of us now, because we're going to see reductions in business license revenues, obviously, and also tourism tax dollars. That's your food and beverage tax. It's going to take a big hit. and we'll have to rearrange things, make some sometimes painful priorities. But I think we're going into it with a certain cushion that's going to make it easier for us than it will for many cities.
Thinking about your creativity and a lot of the creativity that we're starting to see, where businesses are switching from making pillows to making masks, and companies are starting to make ventilators who might have made something else before. I think that your creativity and your innovative abilities will probably inform what you do going forward, and advice that you might be giving to people in terms of what they should be thinking about. Is there any of that advice that you might want to share with our listeners right now who might be thinking that they're going to have to change the way they do business or change to another business? But what would you tell them just to be thinking about?
Well, I think it's another reminder that things can change very quickly in the real estate world, in the in city services of all kinds, and it's another lesson in that. Again, I hope we've given ourselves some cushion to operate. We're probably going to be looking for some ways, and speaking of creativity, we're going to be looking for ways for the city perhaps to do some helpful things, provide some assistance in a way that we never would have thought of in the past in terms of direct assistance. Now, public dollars under state law can only be used for public purposes and public entities. We can't just give you property tax dollars, and we're not allowed to under state law. But there might be ways that we can, work at some indirect ways to help small business, our restaurants, our shops, our stores, and through that help employees of those businesses. So we're going to be looking for some maximum creativity in that. We did a little of that in 2008 after the recession. We actually set up it was a loan pool for restaurants. It's something specific as that. We never had that before. We did that after the last recession. But I'm hoping we'll have to be just as creative in coming up with some new ways, because the priorities are going to change. We're going to be looking, for more help in more fundamental way for our small businesses.
Mayor, our show is called The Business of Innovation, and that's one of the reasons I've wanted to interview you for quite a while. And I can hear that the business of innovation is still very much going on in the city of Greenville, and we feel grateful to have you at the helm, because you've been through a lot, you've seen a lot, and I believe we can all put up a sign that says this too will pass. Would you agree with me?
This too will pass, but it will also change things. Just as I'm speaking to you now for this podcast on the phone, we tried rather unsuccessfully to work the Zoom today, but we'll get back to that. Everybody else I'm using it for other purposes. I think teleconferencing it will be off and running in a new way too. We're finding that we could provide many city services to people in the business license department and in the development office, that we could do more of this online. It's going to speed that process up in Greenville and everywhere else, I'm sure. And so we're stressing that to the maximum. I think in working with our employees too, I think we've discovered we had some things in us that we didn't know we had.
Absolutely.
And we can continue to do that. And before I let you off on innovation, I do want to say that one of the most powerful things that we have in Greenville is Clemson University and Furman. Having the talent and creativity of the university here is extremely important. My prediction would be that it will continue to be one of the big game changers in the years ahead. And so I hope to see Clemson with the MBA school downtown, and of course Clemson ICAR, hope to see the presence expand in our city. I think it's vitally important. I think it's good for Clemson, but I think it's also vitally important for our city in attracting talent and providing a good economic base in our downtown.
Exactly, and I know you were part of those conversations back when we were out in the falls, and encouraging us to, think about doing something even bigger and allowing more space. And we're so thrilled to be in this space at 1 North Main Street. It's just been great.
We've come so far so fast too. It's just time to kind of think about the future, what we want to do in the future on that. But we've come so far so fast. I can recall the Sparrow Center when it first opened.
Yeah.
In a small office down on South Main across from City Hall. And I guess that was probably nearly 20 some years ago. And I can remember looking at my office one day, and I actually recall seeing some young people gathered on Court Square. And I remember I was on the phone or something at the time. I was just looking out the window from the 10th floor. I remember looking down thinking, wow, those are Clemson students down there. How
And
amazing that was.
and now there are about 700 graduate Clemson students on Main Street. And so
Yeah.
it's been great for our program, and we're just really thrilled to be there. But again, your influence once again, so we thank you. And I feel like I've come to a point where I just want to say, I hope you can have a restful evening, and I hope that you are able to really take care of yourself during all of this, because we know it's a lot on you. But again, thank you so much for all you do and for your influence, and we feel like we're really in good hands, and we'll definitely be watching your announcements and your meetings, and taking your instructions, and doing the best we can do on this end too.
Well, I'm backed by a great team of people, the city council, the city staff, and a whole community that wants to do the right thing. And if we'll do the right thing, we'll get through this, and the faster we get through it, the better.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Mayor.
Thank you.
Take care.